South Hills, today I want to take a moment and hit the pause button. We as a society tend to run through one event to the next. There's a scripture that I want to read to you that's a reminder of hitting that pause button and making sure we take time to celebrate what God has done in our life. And this scripture is found in Psalms chapter 46, verse 10. It reads like this: "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." And so today what I want to do is just celebrate what we've been able to do as a community and what we've been able to do as a church that's focused on hearing from God and allowing God to move in our lives. This year alone, we've had 7 child dedications, which means families who are committing to raise their children in a godly way to make sure that they grow up knowing what God has instilled for their lives. We also have had 13 people be baptized. People who are saying, I want the world to know that my relationship with God matters, and I want to be obedient to God's word by having a fresh start and a new beginning. The other thing I want to celebrate is this: 72 people have taken the next step by signing up for our Discover class that ultimately gives them the opportunity to hear what we believe, what we're all about, why we focus on reaching people for Christ, why we focus on taking next steps. And the one that gets me the most excited, this year alone, we've had 284 people say yes to Jesus, to trusting God and believing that Jesus is a crucial part of their life and wanting Jesus to be a part of the rest of their life. As people move into a relationship with trusting God more and more and more, that's something we want to celebrate, such as our first-time givers, people who have now stepped into trusting God with their finances. We've had 302 first-time givers alone this year. People are stepping out in faith and saying, God, I trust you. I trust you more than what the economy is doing and more than what ultimately we're facing. And I'm going to put my faith in you because you are in control. And the last number I want to just take a moment to pause and celebrate is the amount of people who have filled out Connect cards. Every week when you walk into one of our campuses, one of our campus pastors or a host will stand up on stage and say, if you are ready for the next step and you would like to go further in your relationship with God, whether it would be taking a Discover class, whether it be saying yes to Jesus, whether it be signing up and saying yes to being baptized, or saying yes to joining a South Hills group, or serving along the local church, we've had 908 people fill out Connect cards and saying, yes, I'm ready for the next step. And we want to make sure that before we run to the next weekend, to pause and celebrate what God is doing in South Hills Church through all of our church families.
Well, we just got back from a little trip out. It was great. Alec did a great job, by the way, last week. He was dressed impeccably. I was so proud of him. You know, he had a Hawaiian shirt on and shorts. I was really, really proud of him. But it was great to get out for a few days. And then this week, it just kind of continues because I'm wearing the Father's Day shirt that my girls got me. See that? Go. See that? Isn't that cool? Mickey. They know I like Disneyland and stuff like that. And so they're actually taking me to Fantasmic tonight. So we're going to see that show. And so we're going to continue the vacation. And if you've seen social media posts from us, we are at Disneyland a lot. We've got passes. And from the pictures, we look like a perfect family. It's true. Look at these pictures. That is a perfect family right there. Look at, we have next one there. Look at that. On that ride, look at that. Look at that perfect family. Another one. I mean, that's a perfect family when that's what we show on social media, right? We show you this perfect family that loves Disneyland and loves each other. However, this is much more the reality.
No more! No more! I don't like this. I like Papa. Phoebe, stop! No more!
That is actually, thank you very much. That is actually the more of the reality, okay? That's the reality. Not necessarily the perfect pictures that we take in front of the castle and everything. That's much more of the reality. And I say that because it's interesting. We have pastors, so we tend to go often. But when we're there, we have that a lot, all right? And what we do is we see other people, and they're there for maybe the first time ever. Maybe they saved up all year to go to this Disneyland trip, and they're there for a week. Maybe they saved up for 5 years, and they're at that Disneyland thing, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, the kid lost his Mickey doll, or the food is super expensive, or the lines are long, or Pirates is shut down. And I think to myself, they have saved up all this time for this experience. I mean, I like it, but we only go for a couple of hours. But I'm thinking that's their whole deal. And that's what really got them through their work, right? It's this carrot that we have of the vacation. When we're working, we've got this carrot. Like, if I just get through the sludge of work, I can get to this carrot because our family is going to Disneyland. And that should pay off, right? But it doesn't always do that. You know, in fact, we look at our weekends like that, if we're being honest, right? It's like, that's why they call it hump day. Because you're just like trying to get through the week in work, and then you get to Wednesday, and you're like, if I could just get past Wednesday, I could finally make it to the weekend, and then I'll be good. And guys, there is a beautiful poem about that very thing. It was written by a famous theologian. It's beautiful. You may need to get your tissues ready. I'm going to read this to you. It's a beautiful poem. It says this: everyone's watching to see what you will do. Everyone's looking at you. Oh, everyone's wondering, will you come out tonight? Everyone's trying to get it right. Get it right. Everybody's working for the weekend. Everybody wants a new romance. Everybody's going off the deep end. Everybody needs a second chance. Oh, you want a piece of my heart? You better start from the start. You want to be in the show? Come on, baby, let's go. That's Loverboy, 1981. Now, here's the thing. That's the idea, right? I'm just trying to get to the weekend, because if I get to the weekend, then I'm good. But it doesn't always work that way. Yes, vacations can be relaxing and nice and cool. But oftentimes, guys, our weekends or our vacations is an escape from reality. Escape from a job we hate. Escape from this thing that we have to do, escape from these cruel realities of this responsibility. So the hard truth, and this is a little slide here, the hard truth is that good time off can never fix what bad time on has broken. I'm gonna say that again. Good time off can never fix what bad time on has broken. Now, if you have an unhealthy way of vacation or time off, you're gonna have an unhealthy way of resting. Part of that is because working and vacation aren't opposites. Work and rest are friends, and they're not enemies, okay? And I think in our culture, we have made them enemies. I either go to work or I get a vacation, but they're on two completely different sides of the spectrum. Work is here and vacation is here. However, that's not how we were made. God actually created us to have this symbiotic relationship between work and rest. He created us to work, but he also created us to rest, like we talked about in week 1. You know, work is not the bad thing. It's we do it in unhealthy ways, even if what we're doing is good. Even if you're taking care of the homeless, or you're a teacher, or you have this good job that's actually giving back to society. If you're doing it in an unhealthy way, it's not going to be very good for you, right? Because you're taking care of the wrong things, and a vacation is not going to solve that. So if it's, for example, it's like you're wondering, why did my car stop? I filled up the gas tank. It's full. But your oil light was the one that was on. So yeah, that's true. You filled up your gas tank. That's good, but you ignored another issue, and you need them both to go. You can make the car go. So it's not like a vacation is going to solve all of your work problems. Your life needs to rest and work. They need to go together. God works, so we work. God rested, so we rest. And work isn't tied to sin any more than rest should be tied to exhaustion. And we see this as a command, guys. We see this in Exodus 28. Moses says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. This is what God says through Moses. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God, says God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son nor your daughter nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. And then in Exodus, it goes on to explain, for in 6 days, the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. As you see here in Exodus, it's tied to the creation story, right? So what does it mean to say, when he says, remember the Sabbath? He says, remember it. And I want to pause for a second, because what a lot of people don't know, or they don't really fully understand, is that Moses actually taught the Ten Commandments twice. Once in Exodus, and that's the one we think of all the time, the one in Exodus, but he also teaches this again in Deuteronomy a little bit later. Now, why is that? Well, they get to the Promised Land. The Israelites are actually wandering for 40 years, and finally they get to the edge of the Promised Land. And right before they go into the Promised Land, Moses kind of starts to reminisce a little bit, because he understands that this is a new generation that he's talking to, and he needs to explain it in a little bit of a different way, okay? So a baby that left the Egyptian rule was an infant. Now that he or she is in their 40s or their late 30s. So it's a whole new generation. So he explains it in a slightly different way. And here's how he explains it in Deuteronomy. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And again, instead of the creation, he says this, remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. And you could take that word observe, and you could also translate it into guard. So observe or guard. So notice how it says observe or guard in Deuteronomy, but it says remember in Exodus. Now, why is that? Now, essentially, it's the same thing. It's telling you to rest, but the rationale is totally different. In Exodus, it was about the creation. God rested so you could rest, right? It's okay. In Exodus, it was about getting away from the Egyptian rule that they were enslaved with. It was rest on the Sabbath day. Little bit different, well, actually very different, but the same essential thing is to rest. Now, why is that? And the instruction in Exodus was for people who had just been liberated from slavery. Now, these are people that had no idea the concept of rest because they are slaves, so they don't understand that. And so there's a gentleness in how Moses is explaining, or how God is really saying it, and that is, it's okay to rest. It's almost like God saying, child, it's okay to rest. You don't have to work 7 days a week. It's okay. I rested, and you could rest. So there's a tenderness in that. It's okay. It's okay. I want you to follow my example. They don't understand that because they've never really were able to rest. They were slaves. So there's a little bit of a tenderness in that. And he says, I made you in my image, and I rested, and I want you to rest. 40 years later, he is talking to an entirely different generation, and they're far more privileged. So they don't understand what it was like to be enslaved. So he's got to explain it in a bit of a different way. Now, it's a generational difference, and I think that's how generations work. I remember when my cousins and my brother and I, we went to move my grandfather out of his house. He had lived in that house since the 1920s, like with my grandmother, and they lived there forever. But when he was in his 90s, he couldn't live by himself anymore. So we went to move his stuff out. And he was not a hoarder at all, but he literally had coffee cans and coffee cans and coffee cans of nails and bolts and light bulbs and little things for the lamps and wires, and all these things were rusted, and he had them in all of these coffee cups. And I'm thinking, what in the world are you doing with all this stuff? I didn't understand it. Why don't you just go to Home Depot? Stuff's not that expensive, right? Bucket of nails, pretty cheap. But I didn't understand is he had gone through the Depression. And there was no guarantee he was going to get any of that the following day. There was no guarantee he would have any money the following day. So he was saving everything, and he was preparing because he loved his family, and he wanted to make sure his family was taken care of. I love my family too, and I want to take care of my family too, but it's a totally different perspective. My generation was far more privileged than his generation. So I had no concept from what he was doing this for. And it made sense after he explained it. Kind of a funny side note, when we were going through it, we literally found everything. I mean, remember that? Literally. So my cousin lifts up this thing. You remember this? And we just see a skeleton of a cat. This thing had to have died in the 1950s or something. It was like Jurassic Cat, really. It was like we lifted this thing up. We're like, oh my goodness. And my cousin Glenn's like, Grandpa, we found your cat. It was just like this. Whoa. All right. So very different ways of explaining. So Moses is telling this next generation, don't forget what you're free from. In Exodus, it's a way of tapping into that creation. In Deuteronomy, the Sabbath is an act of defiance against the Pharaoh and his slave drivers. In Exodus, it's a way to say yes to God and his world. And then in Deuteronomy, it's a way of saying no to Egypt and its systems. So I hope you're seeing the difference here. In Exodus, it's an invitation to join God in his delight. And in Deuteronomy, it's a warning to stay away from Egypt's way of life. So God is really speaking through Moses to give them what they needed most. Sometimes they needed to remember, and sometimes they needed to guard. So the message we need to hear today is to guard the Sabbath in this culture means to guard your rest, okay? So that's what we really need to hear. Now, why would I say that? In Egypt, they were slaves, and as I mentioned before, slaves don't get rest. And so there was a different way to explain that, and we need to make sure that we are observing that as well, because a slave is only valuable if they produce something. If they produce nothing, then they're worth nothing. If they produce something, then they're worth something. That's how the slave mentality is, right? So the Israelites, when they had that mentality, they said, I can't rest because if I rest, then I'm worth nothing. Then I have no value. And so that's why he's trying to explain that to them. Now, here's the deal. For a slave, rest isn't an option because they have no choice in the matter. And what Moses is saying is you actually have a choice, and you need to rest. It's a way to protect that. Pharaoh was a very cruel master. Nothing was ever good enough. No matter how much these Israelites did, it wasn't good enough. And so they're constantly working to get some value. Now, if we're being honest, Pharaoh really is alive and well in that voice in our heads of you have to produce. If you don't produce today, you're not worth very much. Your value is decreasing. You have to get ahead. Continue to go, continue to go, continue to go. And sometimes that voice is shouting and sometimes it's whispering, you know. I don't have time with my family right now because I've got to do more. I've got to get more. I've got to produce more. My value comes from whatever I'm producing. My value comes from my title or how many people respect me or look at me. And so I've got to do more. I've got to do more. I've got to do more. And if I don't do more, I don't have a value. And you know what? Don't worry, family. Even though I'm working all the time and I don't have any time for you, don't worry because I'll eventually will have a vacation. So that way I can think about work when I'm on vacation, right? I'm just going to keep going because if I'm on vacation, I got to make sure that somebody else isn't getting my accounts or my thing and so there's no time to rest. And we have that Pharaoh in our head, that idea of I'm only as good as what I produce. And guys, pastors are no different, trust me. Pastors, we could have a packed out Sunday, right? We think we're doing pretty good. And then we could have a light Sunday, I'm doing pretty bad. You know? Why? Because we have this mentality, these pharaohs in our head saying, you have to produce all the time. And if you don't, you have no value. Now, in our desire for more, we have this kind of restless guilt that we sometimes have, and we work in very unhealthy ways. Some people really, honestly, they have a hard time taking time off. They have a hard time not going to work. Some people do. Some people actually have a hard time turning their phone off. They feel guilty when they turn their phone off because I feel like I'm letting somebody down. I'm supposed to be producing that way. You know what's funny is some people, not everybody, but some people, if they do nothing on a Saturday but just sleep and play like games with their kids or something like that, but they just sleep all day and they're in their pajamas all day, feel guilty about that. Because on Monday at work, if somebody asks them, what did you do on Saturday? I just did some projects around the house. No, you didn't. You just had your pajamas on all day. But we have this guilt, like we can't admit that, because then they're going to think we're not very valuable or we're lazy or we're not good at anything. I mean, how many times have we literally told our family this will only take a minute, and it takes 20 or 45 minutes? It's real quick. I just got to reply this real quick, and I'm right there with you until the next click comes on your phone. Then I got to real quick again. Just hold on 1 second. You know, just let me reply really, really quick. Now, if you think that this is somebody else and it can't possibly be us, I saw this interesting study not long ago here in this country, and it said from 1973 to 1990, the average work week went up from 40 hours a week to 41 to 47 hours a week. Now, if you think about it, it's not so bad. It's like, okay, 41 hours, 47 hours, okay. Here's the problem. During that same time frame, rest went down by 37%. So while work was going up, rest was actually going down. Okay, and that's where we're starting to see these problems. And right now, we have all these labor-saving things to get to work. We got iPhones and iPads and iWhatevers, right? So we've got all these things, and it makes it very, very difficult. Now, it's Father's Day today, so I'm just going to talk to the dads. And I'm looking in the camera too. I'm just talking to the dads for right now, okay? I know this goes both ways, but I'm just talking for the dads right now. Men are competitive. We like to win. And if we're close, I've got to just get across the goal line. I don't care. I got to win. We get very competitive, okay? And so when we get competitive, we sometimes think that whatever we are doing for work is more important than what our wife is doing for work, okay? They could be working in the workforce, or they could be at home taking care of the kids, which is still an extraordinarily difficult job. But whatever it is they're doing for work, we think whatever we're doing is more important than what they're doing. So when the kids act up, no matter what, I'm in the middle of something, can you go to ask mom? Like, she could be out doing 40 million things, but go ask mom. And you guys, we gotta be really careful with that, okay? And guys, this doesn't work either. Do we have a picture of that, Cap? That doesn't work either, okay? You can't just get, everything's okay, I'm gonna still work, and we cannot do that either. In this New York Times article I read, it said that COVID has effectively killed the sick day. Why? Because you're expected to be at work all the time because we've got Zoom. You could be puking, you could have 104 temperature, but you know what? Because you don't have to drive, you're expected to work. And you've got to get up there. So it's effectively said, you don't have the liberty or the ability to be sick anymore. You want a good example of this? Go to teachers. Teachers have a very difficult time taking a day off. I mean, they could be very, very sick, but it's just so much work to try to get a sub and all that other stuff that they'll often go in sick, and they don't feel like they can. They would tell their kids stay home from school, but they themselves have a very difficult time for doing that. Right now, the U.S. makes up over 22% of the global economy, but we only have 4% of the global population. Think about that for a second. In California alone, we put out over $2 trillion, with a T. We put out over $2 trillion, more than all of Italy, which has 37% higher population than California does, okay? We are always working. Economist Mark Perry explained it this way. He said, it's a testament to the superior world-class productivity of the American worker. Okay, I guess. And when you hear that, I'm a patriotic guy. I'm like, yeah, we do. California could beat up Italy. We're that good, right? It feels good. We rule. But do we, though? Or really, what's ruling us? Well, why can't we take a break? Because we have to have that thing. Materialism or competitiveness or whatever. We've got to have that thing. Something's ruling us. Something's taking over. And that's why we're really talking about this. Guys, it's not an either or. It's important to remember this. You might want to write this down. Underworking and overworking both make us less human. Okay? Underworking and overworking both make us less human and less of who God made us to be. So when Moses told the Israelites, to remember, it's not that he forgot that part of history. It's just like, well, oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Or they didn't forget about it. It was so that they would always know that your life is more than what you produce. God's value in you is more than whatever you're producing. You don't have to work 7 days a week. The Pharaoh is long gone. You're not a slave to him anymore. And here's the deal. Maybe today, you've been triggered by something. Maybe you're thinking, that sounds an awful lot like me. I don't remember the last day I actually had a day off. I don't remember the last time I actually rested. Maybe I do feel guilty when I take time off. Maybe that's what you're thinking right now. Maybe you're thinking, I do only find value in what I produce. Maybe you think that right now. Here's something to remember. Rest is no accident. It must be planned, and it must be protected. It's got to be planned, and it's got to be protected. Left on our own devices, guys, we're going to quickly spiral into a very unhealthy way of working, which will then spiral in a very unhealthy way of resting. So, remembering and guarding the Sabbath, guys, has much, much, much more to do with the 6 days before the actual Sabbath. You cannot just be a workaholic 6 days and go, it's okay, because on 7th day, I'm just going to rest. No, you won't. You got to really protect how you're doing your work life that 6 days so that you actually can. It's like a vacation. Has more to do, way more to do with the way we spend our time than how we spend our time. And if this is you guys, I would ask that you actually please see this as a warning. Anyone that cannot, and this is going to sound harsh, but anyone that cannot obey God's command to rest, to actually have a Sabbath, is a self-imposed slave. You're a slave to something. You're a slave to materialism. You're a slave to having bigger, more, better. You're a slave to beating the Joneses and whatever they're doing, but you're a slave to something. And God's not telling you to go, 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 go. God's saying, yes, work, but yes, rest. Do both. And if you don't stop, it's going to for sure burn you out, if not already. It's funny to think, actually, that the Sabbath or rest is actually a sign of resistance in our community. So you want to be a real rebel? Be a Christian. That's really rebellious, I'm telling you right now, in our culture. I mean, and let me make something also very clear, because I think I need to make this. I am not saying to be lazy, okay? Some people are like, great, I'll rest 7 days a week. No. That's not at all what I'm saying. You do need to work. That's, again, we talked about this a lot in week 1. God made us to work. But also, you guys, you understand this is much more about people that really feel like I have to produce or I'm not valued. And this is really who I'm talking to right now. So in our society, guys, resting is a sign of resistance. And it's a broken way of thinking. It's a broken system. But it's okay to say to those pharaohs when they creep up in your head, it's okay to say, no, I don't have to have more stuff. No, I don't have to have a bigger house. No, I don't have to beat the Joneses. Guys, it's okay to tell your kids they don't have to be in every sport. I mean, guys, we have kids right now that go from this sport, which I love youth sports, trust me. It teaches kids valuable lessons. I absolutely love youth sports. I think it's super important for growing up. But here's where it gets to be a problem. This sport ends, right when that sport ends, another sport begins, and another sport begins, and another sport begins. So they go from school to karate to ballet to dance to soccer to softball, and it's just they don't have time to rest. These kids are just going and going and going, and then they're going to grow up thinking that's what I have to do to be valuable. Rest isn't an option. So you could say no to all that stuff, and yes, I will work, I will provide, I will put my family first, but I'm going to do it in a very unhealthy way. I mean, a very healthy way. Now, sorry about that. Whew, this is live, isn't it? So as I mentioned, we just got back from Palm Springs, and we had a good time. Do we have some pictures of that? It was really, really fun, and it was great, and it was just getting together. It was a blast. But if you notice, those smiles were bigger than before, and there's a reason for that. Because we actually stopped to rest, okay? The girls were actually had to remind me a couple times, Dad, can you put your phone away? And so I was like, okay, so I would do a thing where we'd go to the pool, I would put it in the drawer at the hotel, and I would just go, and I would not have my phone. And they loved it. It was so fun for them. Okay, and it was something that they were like, yes, this is we're getting their time, and we rested, and it was great. But I'm going to be very honest with you guys right now. The Ilarios, a family in our church, they said, we want to gift you with this. We have a timeshare in Palm Springs. We want to gift you with this. And when Jeff first approached me, I'm going to be very honest with you. I said, what a sweet gesture. That's so sweet. I don't think it's going to happen, though. That was my first reaction. I've got so many things going on right now, trying to get all this building stuff, trying to get all the codes that they need and all the other stuff. And I was like, I just don't see it happening. And that was my honest, truthful first response. So they did the smart thing. They went to Melanie. And Melanie made it happen, right? So I was like, okay, great. But it was so good. It was just so good to rest, to put my phone away and just have that time with my kids, with my family. Now, guys, again, even though I'm a pastor, I've got the pharaohs in my head too. I'm talking to all of us. I have got that thing too. It's okay to admit that, but now you got to go, okay, what am I going to do with it? You could say, well, that's you. I'm just going to keep going. It's not going to work out for you. I'm telling you now. It's just not. You're going to hit a wall at some point. And we got to be honest about this. So you might think, well, okay, great. What do I do next? And we're going to have some slides. You might want to take a picture of this, or you might want to journal this. But since rest is something we need to guard, protect, and plan for, what would it look like for you to change the way you spend your time on so that you could fully embrace your time off? Okay? Rest is something that we need to guard, protect, and plan for. What would it look like for you to change the way you spend your time on so that you could fully embrace your time off? And what are 3 things you could do during your time on to prepare for your time off? What are some things you could do on your time on to prepare for your time off? Now, guys, here's a little hint. Let's not make technology the bad guy. Okay, I think that's what we do. If I hear this all the time. If I were to take my phone out right now and I were to smash it with a hammer and I would say, technology doesn't own me, I'm going to observe the Sabbath, and it doesn't own me at all, and I smashed it, I know me. By like 4:30, I'm going to be going through my garage looking for a fax or something that I can, send. I'm going to try to find some sort of an old brick phone or something so we can't keep blaming inanimate objects for things that we are doing, and I do that all the time. Well, I can't help it. My phone's buzzing all the time. What am I supposed to do? Not answer it, On your Sabbath day, you don't have to answer everything. It's okay. You could just let it go and really observe that rest. So I'm talking to me too. So we could commit to doing that. But guys, the biggest message if you are feeling like I am only as valuable as what I produce, understand this. God made you to love you. You don't have to try to impress him with how much stuff you do or how busy you are. You really want to impress God? Be who he created you to be. Yes, work, but yes, rest. I know the society say, well, no, you can't do that. God's saying yes. You want to impress me? Rest on the Sabbath. Enjoy it. Enjoy that. And I want to make sure that we are doing that together, and we're finding time to do that and encourage each other. I am so grateful for the people in this church that said, you need a break. You need to stop. And we're there to help each other in that. So we got to encourage each other. Let's pray. Father.